My contribution to Sporty Spec is titled Perpetual Check. 3:57 a.m. Aiden closed his eyes and felt the familiar stab of nausea as he was pulled from his apartment. A moment later, he opened his eyes onto an old-fashioned sitting room. The lady sat at her inlaid mahogany chessboard, its staunton chess pieces already scattered in play. She nodded in greeting, and he took the empty seat across from her, still warm from her previous opponent. She was playing white. She was always white. "I missed you last week," she said. She pressed the old analog timer beside the board. "Your move." Ticking filled the room. "I fell asleep," Aiden apologized. He peeked at her face while he examined the board. Flickering gaslight showed that she remained unchanged, as lovely as the first time he had been called to her table so many years ago. The players who had taken their turns in the minutes before him hadn't left much to work with. A black onyx army of defeated pieces flanked the board. Aiden sighed. He jumped a pawn up a square, then punched the timer. It was a wasted move, but he needed more time to form a strategy. He needed more time. "This isn't exactly fair," he said, almost immediately wishing he could take the words back. The lady knew all about unfairness. How many people faced her each night, moving only a few pieces in their turns? "I won my last tournament," he said quickly. "I qualified as candidate master." He had dedicated his life to the game, to her. "I'm getting better all the time." She smiled. Her hand darted to the board, moved a knight, and took his pawn in one smooth movement. His clock resumed ticking. Aiden's father had given him a chess set for his 7th birthday. Shortly afterward, when Aiden stayed up late studying playbooks, he found himself facing the lady, hopelessly infatuated. She was in her early 20s, then and always. Though he was much older than her now, he still loved her. She was the only woman he had ever loved. "Time's almost up," she said. Aiden nudged a rook over to threaten the white queen. She raised her eyebrows, then captured his rook with her queen. Check. His king dodged imminent danger, and Aiden stopped the timer with only 3 seconds remaining. "Have you ever lost?" he asked. The lady always allowed him one question, but he had never asked her this. He thought that he might not have many more chances. He used to wonder if she was testing him and the other players who were each given a minute to play against her each week. He had slowly come to realize that it must be she who was being tested. She maneuvered her own rook, setting him up for checkmate in 2. He positioned a bishop to retaliate, to stall the inevitable, knowing he had no chance, knowing he had failed her. Check. His last second ticked away. "I lose every night," she said. 3:58 a.m. I have another short piece. This appeared on another online fiction market called From the Asylum, and this one appeared in April 2006, and it's called The Pie Hole. "Hey, did you eat my pie?" Peter stared accusingly at his roommate Mark. He had been looking forward to the last slice of pecan pie. Mark had noticed the pie earlier, had been about to eat it, but then was distracted by Peter's girlfriend, who seemed bored waiting for Peter to come home from work. "Nah, I didn't eat your pie." Guilt showed in Mark's face. "Well, it's gone." "Maybe what's-her-name ate it," Mark said. "Maggie?" Maggie was Peter's girlfriend. "Yeah, whatever. I can't keep track of them anymore." To avoid looking at Peter, Mark opened the fridge and checked inside. "Hey, what's this thing?" He opened the door wider and pointed at a dark something in the center of the fridge. Peter came closer and looked at it. It was a round hole with soft edges. Peter crouched and saw that it disappeared when viewed from head on. He stuck a finger into it and pulled it back rapidly. "Whoa, it's cold." Peter and Mark pulled the refrigerator out of its niche and were surprised to see that the hole remained in place. "That's unusual," Peter said. "I think that ate your pie." "Where do you suppose it goes?" "I don't think it goes anywhere." "But I want my pie." "Give the pie a rest," Mark said. "This is way cooler than pie." In the next week, they used a strange phenomenon as a trash receptacle, happy to no longer have to take the garbage out. They dutifully continued to recycle glasses and plastics. "Does it look bigger to you?" Mark asked. "A little, yeah." The dark disk had expanded another foot in radius. "Maybe it's getting full." "Don't be silly," Peter said. "It's infinite." He sat down and stared at it for several minutes. Say, have you seen the cat lately? No, I haven't seen her in a couple of days. Mark glanced at the black hole, then followed the path she might have taken from the floor to the chair, to the table, to the counter, then down. You don't think... Peter stood and looked at the hole sadly. He opened a can of tuna and started scraping the contents into the hole with a fork. What are you doing? She might get hungry. In the next week, Peter and Mark were careful not to toss anything into the black hole, except fingernail clippings and catnip. Then, one night, Peter knocked loudly on Mark's door. Mark, have you seen Maggie? Surprisingly, Maggie lasted as Peter's girlfriend for almost 2 weeks, which was unprecedented in recent memory. Mark flattered himself by taking some of the credit for that. No. Maggie had in fact just been in Mark's bed only moments before. She was heading to the kitchen for whipped cream, but that was 15 minutes ago. They entered the kitchen and were shocked to see that the black hole had grown dramatically overnight. Peter carefully retrieved a can of whipped cream from beneath it. Oh, Maggie. She got too close, Mark said. It's her own fault. He was relieved that Peter would not find out about his affair with Maggie, but he knew he would miss the sex. We have to do something about this thing. There was a slight draft pulling into the center of the hole. Peter approached the rim and leaned over it. You're not going to go after her, are you? Hell no. Peter sprayed some whipped cream into his mouth, then dropped the can into the hole. Licking his lips, he turned to Mark. We have to move. But how are we going to explain this to Mr. Horowitz? Their landlord would likely not take kindly to a massive vortex in the middle of his newly renovated kitchen. Screw it, he can keep the security. Mark nodded and they went to bed.